The sound of rain tapping softly against the kitchen window had always been comforting to me, but tonight it sounded different, heavier, almost accusing. Every drop that hit the glass felt like a question I didn't want to answer. I sat at the old wooden kitchen table, the one Julian and I had bought 38 years ago when we first moved into this house. The surface was scratched and stained, but to me it was sacred, a witness to a lifetime of meals, laughter, arguments, and silence. Especially silence. Julian wasn't home yet. He was supposed to be back by 9. It was now nearly 11:30. I stared at the clock, the same one my mother gave us on our wedding day. Its ticking had become unbearable. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each second screamed, "He's lying to you." I had ignored it for months, the perfume that lingered on his shirts, the sudden business trips, the late-night text messages that made him smile faintly before turning his phone screen away. I told myself I was being paranoid, that after 40 years of marriage, surely we were just growing old, not apart, but tonight was different. He had called around 7 p.m. "Dinner with clients," he said casually. "Might run late. Don't wait up," I asked. "In Dallas again?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second, too quick for most people to notice, but after decades together, I could hear it. "Yes, Dallas," he said almost defensively, then hung up before I could reply. That hesitation lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. Because just this morning, I'd seen a receipt in his jacket pocket for a gas station in San Antonio. Dallas was 4 hours north. San Antonio, 3 hours south. I sat there, the dim kitchen light flickering over my hands. I tried to focus on the small things. The chipped mug beside me, the smell of cooling coffee, the distant hum of the refrigerator. But my mind kept circling back to that receipt. Why would he lie? When you've lived with someone for 4 decades, you know their rhythms, their pauses, their moods. You can sense when something's wrong, even if they don't say it. And Julian had changed. He used to talk to me about everything, about his job, his friends, his dreams. But lately there was distance, a wall. He'd come home late, take long showers, avoid eye contact, and retreat to the guest room because of his back pain. I didn't confront him. Part of me was afraid to hear the truth, because once you hear it, you can't unhear it. The headlights flashed through the window. His car. Finally. I sat still, my hands clasped together, heart pounding. I wanted to look calm, composed, like I wasn't sitting here wondering if my entire marriage was a lie. The door opened. The smell of rain and his cologne filled the house. But there was something else, faint yet unmistakable, a perfume that wasn't mine, floral, sweet, younger. "Julian," I said softly as he entered. He looked startled, almost guilty. "You're still up?" I couldn't sleep. I gestured toward the coffee pot. "Long night?" He loosened his tie, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, business dinner ran late." I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides 100 suspicions. "Dallas again?" He froze for half a second, barely noticeable, before nodding. "Yes, Dallas." My gaze flicked to his shoes. They weren't muddy. They were dusty, like they'd walked through dry Texas heat, not city rain. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but instead I said, "You must be exhausted. Go rest." He exhaled in relief, as if I'd given him permission to escape. "Thanks," he murmured, disappearing down the hall. When I heard the shower running, I walked quietly to the living room. His jacket lay draped over the sofa. I reached into the pocket. Inside was a folded napkin. It smelled like that same perfume, a woman's perfume. I opened it, and there, scribbled in neat handwriting, were the words, "Next time, same place. 7 p.m. Don't forget," and a tiny heart drawn at the bottom. My hands trembled. My mouth went dry. There it was, The confirmation I never wanted. For years I'd believed we were solid, not perfect, but built on love, trust, and shared history. But this little napkin tore that illusion to shreds. I went to the garage, my heart pounding in my throat, and opened his car door. The air smelled faintly of that same floral perfume. I reached into the glove compartment and froze. Inside was a small, half-empty tube of personal lubricant, not ours. I stood there in silence, the truth hitting me like a physical blow. My husband, my Julian, was having an affair. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I placed the lubricant back exactly where it was, closed the glove box carefully, and walked back inside. The rain had stopped. The world was quiet again, but inside me a storm was forming. That night, I lay awake beside him. He slept peacefully, unaware that I knew everything. Every breath he took felt like an insult. Every soft snore a reminder of the betrayal sleeping inches from me. As dawn broke, a strange calm washed over me. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. No, I was going to watch. And when the time was right, I was going to end this. The next day, I went about my routine like nothing had happened. I baked bread for the bakery, watered the plants, even laughed with my neighbor Mrs. Howard when she dropped by, but inside, I was calculating, observing. Julian left his phone charging in the kitchen while he showered. Normally, I'd never touch it. But that morning, my hands moved on their own. No texts, no calls. But one unread email from a strange address. Can't wait for tonight. I opened it. The message was short. You were incredible last time. Let's make tonight even better. Same hotel? My stomach twisted. When Julian came out of the shower, humming softly, I smiled as if nothing was wrong. Coffee's ready, I said sweetly. He kissed my forehead, something he hadn't done in months, and said, "You're the best, Jules." If only he knew what was coming. That afternoon, I made a call to an old friend named Clara Miller. Years ago, she'd helped me find a private investigator for a friend whose husband was cheating. I told her I needed that number. She didn't ask questions. She just said softly, "Juliet, be careful." At 2 p.m., I met the investigator, Thomas Graves, in a small cafe downtown. He was a quiet man, mid-50s, polite, the kind of person who's seen too much to be surprised by anything. I handed him the photos of the receipt, the napkin, the email. "I think my husband is cheating on me," I said. "I need proof." He nodded, took notes, and said simply, "You'll have it." 2 nights later, I had it. Thomas sent me a message with a series of photos. Julian, wearing his favorite gray suit, stepping out of his car in front of a 4-star hotel in San Antonio. Beside him, holding his hand, was a woman. But not just any woman, it was Allison, my daughter-in-law. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The world tilted. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. My mind screamed, no, but the images were undeniable. Allison, the woman who had married my son Daniel, who had called me Mom for years, who had baked with me in my kitchen, was the one Julian was cheating with. I looked at the photos again and again, hoping I was wrong. But there was no mistake. Their hands intertwined. Their faces are too close. Their smiles, guilty, intimate. I wanted to destroy something, to scream, to shatter every dish in the house. But instead I sat down, and I began to plan. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The images kept flashing behind my eyelids, Julian's hand brushing against Allison's arm, the way she smiled up at him like a schoolgirl with a crush, the candlelight glinting off the wine glasses between them. I had thought my heart couldn't break any further. I was wrong. It didn't break this time. It hardened. By morning, I wasn't the same woman who had gone to bed crying into her pillow. Something inside me had changed. I was done being the dutiful wife who turned a blind eye. I had spent 40 years baking bread for a man who was now sharing his body and secrets with my son's wife. I was finished pretending. When Julian came into the kitchen that morning, humming the same song he always did, I smiled like nothing had happened. He asked for coffee, and I poured it, steady hands, calm voice. He didn't notice that my smile didn't reach my eyes. He never noticed any more. "I'll be late tonight again," he said, stirring his coffee, not looking up. "There's a meeting with a new investor." "Of course," I said softly. "Where?" "Dallas," he said automatically. "Dallas. Always Dallas." He leaned over, kissed the top of my head, and left. The door shut behind him, and I just stood there, staring at the steam curling from his coffee cup. Dallas. I almost laughed. The lie had become so rehearsed, so lazy, that it was insulting. By noon, I was sitting across from Thomas Graves again at the small cafe. He had a calmness about him that made people talk. "You were right," he said quietly, sliding a manila folder across the table. "It's her. Your daughter-in-law? I'm sorry." Inside were photos, timestamps, details. Julian and Allison had been meeting for months. Hotels, restaurants, parking lots. Always the same routine. Always San Antonio. Thomas hesitated before continuing. "Do you want me to keep following him?" I looked down at the photos, the proof of every betrayal I'd felt but refused to see, and shook my head. "No, you've done enough." He nodded, handed me his card, and said gently, "Be careful what you do next, Mrs. Roberts. People lose themselves in revenge." I smiled faintly. I already lost myself 40 years ago. When I got home, I printed the photos one by one and spread them out on the dining table. Each one was a dagger, each one a memory rewritten. I saw Julian's hand on Allison's waist. I saw her smiling. I saw his face lit with a joy I hadn't seen in decades. And then something inside me snapped. I went to the garage, opened the glove compartment again, and stared at the small tube of lubricant sitting there like a quiet confession. I picked it up, held it in my hand, and whispered, "You want to play games, Julian? So do I." That evening, I drove to the hardware store and bought a small, unmarked tube of industrial-strength superglue. I drove home, my heart calm and steady. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't shaking. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where our life had begun, and carefully replaced the lubricant with the glue, wiping every trace of my fingerprints. Then I put it back in the glove box exactly where it had been. My hands didn't tremble. My breathing didn't falter. I was as calm as a surgeon before an operation. That night, Julian came home later than ever. Midnight. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose, his hair a mess. He looked satisfied, smug. "Rough night?" I asked from the couch. He froze, then smiled that fake, tired smile. "You could say that. We closed a big deal tonight. Good for you," I said softly. He walked past me, heading straight for the bedroom. I could smell the perfume again, stronger now, clinging to his skin like guilt. I stayed on the couch for a long time after he fell asleep, listening to his steady breathing. I almost pitied him. Almost. The next morning, I watched from the window as he left for work. He didn't notice the way my eyes followed the car as it disappeared down the road. Hours passed. Then the phone rang. It was Mrs. Howard, our neighbor from across the street. Her voice was panicked. "Juliet! Something's happened. Julian, he's in trouble. There are police cars and an ambulance outside the old Maplewood Motel." I froze, my stomach twisted. For a second, I thought I might faint. "What happened?" I managed to whisper. "I don't know, honey, but they're saying he's stuck in his car, and the firefighters had to come. Oh my God, it's a mess." I hung up. My hands were cold. My mind was blank. I hadn't wanted this much chaos. I'd wanted humiliation, not disaster. But it was too late now. I grabbed my coat and rushed to the scene. The flashing lights reflected off wet pavement. A crowd had gathered. I pushed through them, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. There was Julian's car, the same SUV that had carried his lies for months. The door was open, and paramedics were clustered around it. Julian was sitting inside, pale, sweating, trembling. His face was contorted in pain, and beside him, Allison was crying hysterically, covered in a blanket, her face red with embarrassment. It took me only a second to understand. The superglue, the glove compartment, the lubricant that wasn't. I turned away, pressing a hand to my mouth to keep from laughing or crying. I wasn't sure which. Mrs. Howard spotted me. "Juliet, are you okay?" "I can't believe this." They said they got stuck together. The words hit me like thunder, and then, like lightning, came the laughter. Silent at first, then uncontrollable. I covered my mouth, pretending to sob, but I was laughing. God help me, I was laughing. They had to call the fire department to separate them. The humiliation was total. Cameras flashed. Reporters were already on the scene. Julian's secret life was no longer a secret. When the paramedics finally wheeled him away, our eyes met for a brief second. His were full of shock, confusion, and something else. Fear. He knew. That night, the phone didn't stop ringing. Friends, neighbors, even my son Daniel called from another state, his voice thick with anger and disbelief. "Mom, what the hell happened?" "Dad's in the hospital. Allison's gone missing. People are talking." I told him only the truth. "Your father lied to us, Daniel." And lies have a way of sticking. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then he whispered, "Mom, you knew, didn't you?" "Yes," I said. For a long time. He didn't ask anything else. He just hung up. That night, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat in front of the window, watching the rain return. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace, not happiness. Not joy, but peace. Julian spent 2 days in the hospital. When he came home, his pride was shattered, his face pale, his hands shaking. The story had spread like wildfire. Everyone in town knew. He couldn't step outside without whispers following him. He didn't speak to me for 3 days. Then, one morning, he broke the silence. "Why did you do it?" he asked, his voice hollow. I turned from the sink and looked at him. "Why did you?" He had no answer. Only tears. For 40 years, I'd been the quiet one, the understanding one, the woman who never raised her voice. But as I looked at him now, this broken, guilty man, I realized I wasn't weak anymore. "I wasn't small. I gave you my life," I said quietly, "and you gave it to her. So now we're even." He tried to speak, but I walked away before he could. That night, I opened my laptop and began typing my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. I uploaded it to my channel, Echoes of Emotion, and titled it, "The Day My Husband's Lies Got Glued Shut." And when the first comments started coming in, women from all over the world saying, "You're not alone. Thank you for telling this. I wish I had your courage," I realized something. Revenge hadn't healed me. But telling the truth had, so I kept talking. I kept writing. I kept living. Because sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes in a tube of superglue. The house was quieter than ever. It had always been a home filled with noise, the clinking of dishes, the murmur of morning news, the sound of Julian's laughter echoing from the living room when he used to watch baseball. Now it was a tomb. Every creak of the floorboards felt like an echo of what used to be. After the scandal, the world outside didn't let us breathe. The neighbors pretended to be sympathetic, but I could see it in their eyes, that gleam of gossip. Whenever I went out to water the garden or check the mailbox, I'd feel their stares burning through the blinds. I heard them whisper, "That's her. That's the woman whose husband got stuck with his daughter-in-law." Julian stopped going to work altogether. He stayed home, sitting by the window like a ghost, staring out at the street as if hoping the world would forget. It wouldn't. The story had gone viral, a headline in every gossip site, a trending post on social media. I had expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even triumph. Instead, what I felt was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes after a long war, when you've won the battle but lost something inside yourself. One afternoon, as I was closing up the bakery, I saw a car pull up in front of the house. My son Daniel. He stepped out, looking older than I remembered, lines on his face that hadn't been there before, eyes tired and dark. He didn't hug me when I opened the door. He just looked at me and said, "Mom, we need to talk." I led him to the kitchen. He didn't sit. He just stood there, his hands trembling slightly. "I spoke to Dad," he said quietly. "He told me what happened, or what he thinks happened." I stayed silent. "He said you set him up," Daniel continued, his voice cracking. "That you knew and you—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Mom, did you really—" I met his eyes. "Did I really what?" He swallowed hard. "Did you really switch the thing? The lubricant?" I said, finishing the sentence for him. "Yes, I did." He stared at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. "Mom, that's insane. You could have hurt them." I raised a hand, calm and steady. "Daniel, he was sleeping with your wife." The words hung between us like smoke. He froze, blinking rapidly as if he hadn't heard right. "What?" "She's been meeting him for months. Hotels, restaurants. I have proof." I slid the manila folder across the table, the same one Thomas had given me. He stared down at the photos, his face draining of color. The silence was deafening. When he finally spoke, it wasn't anger I heard. It was heartbreak. "How long?" "Long enough," I said quietly. He closed the folder, set it down, and pressed his palms against his eyes. Jesus Christ. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock, that relentless reminder of time, of everything wasted. When Daniel finally stood up, his voice was hollow. "I'm filing for divorce." I can't believe this." I reached out, wanting to comfort him, but he stepped back. "I just need time, Mom." Then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. And for the first time, I realized how heavy silence could really be. That night, I sat by the window with a glass of wine. I looked out at the street, empty except for the faint glow of streetlights. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a couple laughed. Life went on, even when mine felt like it had stopped. Julian hadn't spoken to me since the hospital. We moved around each other like ghosts in the same house, sharing air but nothing else. He slept in the guest room now, his voice a stranger's echo when he did speak. But sometimes, late at night, I'd hear him crying. Quiet, broken sobs. The first time I heard them, I almost went to his door. Old habits die hard. But I didn't. I couldn't. A week later, I found a letter on the kitchen table. His handwriting, shaky and uneven. "Juliet, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to. What I did was unforgivable. I've ruined our family, our name, everything we built together. I don't blame you for hating me. I just want you to know that I loved you once. Truly. Maybe not enough, but I did. I'm leaving for a while. Please don't look for me. I can't face anyone here anymore." Julie and I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my mother's old clock. I didn't cry. There were no tears left to cry. Days turned into weeks. The scandal faded from headlines, replaced by newer tragedies, newer distractions. The whispers in town grew softer. People moved on, but I didn't. Not yet. The bakery became my sanctuary. The smell of dough, the rhythm of kneading, the warmth of the oven, they kept me alive. People started coming not just for bread, but for comfort. They'd sit, have coffee, tell me their stories, and somewhere along the way, I realized that I wasn't just surviving. I was healing. One afternoon, a woman about my age came in. She had kind eyes and a weary smile. She said softly, "Are you the lady from the story?" I almost denied it, but then I nodded. She took my hand and whispered, "You're brave." After she left, I stood behind the counter for a long time, just staring at my hands. The same hands that had baked for love, for survival, and yes, for revenge. That night, I opened my laptop again. My video, the one I'd uploaded, had hundreds of thousands of views now. Comments from women all over the world flooded the screen. "You spoke my truth. I thought I was alone. You gave me courage." And for the first time, I smiled. Not the practiced, polite smile I used to give Julian. A real one. Revenge had been the beginning. But what came after? This community of broken, healing souls, that was redemption. I began to record again. New stories, new voices. Stories of betrayal, yes, but also of resilience. Of women who had rebuilt their lives from ashes. One night, while editing a video, I looked at my reflection on the dark screen. My hair had streaks of gray, my eyes lined with age. But there was something in them I hadn't seen in years. Strength. I whispered to my reflection, "You made it, Juliet." The next morning, I went to the ocean. It was early, the sun still climbing, the waves soft and golden. I stood there barefoot, the water touching my feet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't need Julian's apology. I didn't need Allison's remorse. I didn't even need the world's forgiveness, because I had finally forgiven myself for staying too long, for loving too blindly, for believing in something that wasn't real. The tide washed over my feet again, and I whispered to the wind, goodbye, not to him, not to the past, but to the version of me who had waited, doubted, and suffered in silence. The woman who stood there now wasn't broken. She was reborn. It had been 6 months since Julian left. 6 long, quiet months that reshaped everything about my life. The bakery had grown busier, not because of the bread, but because of the story. Women came from nearby towns, some from different states. Even tourists who had heard of the woman who glued her husband's betrayal shut. They came not out of morbid curiosity, but because they wanted to talk, to share, to heal. I listened to every single one of them. Some cried into their coffee, some laughed bitterly through their tears, and some simply sat in silence, grateful to be understood without having to explain. Through them, I found a strange kind of peace, the kind that grows not from forgetting pain, but from making meaning out of it. I thought the past was behind me. Until one evening, the bell above the bakery door chimed. It was late, just before closing time. I looked up from the counter and froze. Julian stood there. He looked older, thinner. His hair had gone completely gray, his once proud posture slightly stooped. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hands trembled when he removed his cap. "Juliet," he said softly. The name came out of his mouth like a prayer he wasn't sure he was allowed to say anymore. I felt the air thicken. The smell of flour and sugar suddenly sharp in my nose. My heart didn't race this time. It didn't ache either, it just steadied. "Julian," I said, calm but cold. "What are you doing here?" He looked down, shame flickering across his face. "I didn't know where else to go. I waited. I've lost everything," he continued. "The business, the house. Daniel doesn't speak to me. Allison's gone. She took off a month after I left. I don't even know where she is now," he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Turns out, she only loved me as long as I had money." I didn't say a word. He looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing me for the first time. His eyes filled with tears. I came to apologize. The words hung in the air like fragile glass. For what? I asked quietly. For everything. For the lies, the betrayal, for ruining our family? He took a shaky breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it. You were right about everything. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is something I should have given you years ago. He handed it to me with trembling fingers. It was a letter, dated almost 15 years earlier. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting faded but familiar. It was my mother's. Juliet, my darling, if you ever doubt your worth, remember this. Love is not proven by sacrifice. It's proven by respect. Don't let anyone take your kindness as weakness. I stared at the words, feeling something shift inside me, an old wound reopening not from pain, but from clarity. She gave it to me before she passed, Julian said, his voice breaking. She told me to give it to you when you needed it most. But I kept it. I was selfish. I didn't want you to see how much you were giving up for me. For a long moment I said nothing. Then, quietly, I folded the letter and placed it in the pocket of my apron. Julian, I said softly, you don't need to ask for forgiveness. Because forgiveness isn't something I'm giving to you. It's something I gave to myself. He looked up, confused. I forgave you the moment I stopped needing your apology, I continued. That's when I stopped carrying your guilt. It's yours to keep now. He nodded slowly, tears spilling down his cheeks. I deserve that. There was a long silence. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the room. Then he said, Juliet, could I work here? Just to help out until I figure things out? I'll stay out of your way. I looked at him for a long time. The man who had once been my husband, my partner, my betrayer. Finally, I said, Julian, you can't rebuild the same house once it's burned down. You can only build something new. But not here. Not with me, he lowered his head. I understand. He turned to leave, his shoulders heavy, his steps slow. But at the door, he stopped. Juliet, he said quietly, do you ever miss us? The way we used to be? I thought about it for a moment. The laughter, the dreams, the long drives, the way he used to kiss my forehead before bed. Then I shook my head. No, Julian, I miss the woman I was back then, the one who believed in love without pain. But she's gone. And I'm not sorry, he smiled sadly. You've become strong. No, I said. I just stopped pretending I wasn't. He nodded, wiped his eyes, and left. The bell chimed one last time, and the door closed behind him. For a long moment, I stood there staring at the empty doorway. Then I turned off the lights and whispered to myself, it's over, but I was wrong. The story wasn't over yet. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in hurried handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo showed Julian sitting on a bench at a bus station, his suitcase beside him. He was looking down, a faint smile on his lips. Behind him, the horizon stretched wide, endless. The letter read simply, Thank you for freeing me, Juliet. I'm going to see the ocean, the one we never visited together. Maybe I'll find peace there. I folded the letter carefully, tears filling my eyes. But this time, they weren't bitter. They were warm. He was gone, truly gone. And finally, so was the weight I'd carried for years. That night, I sat at my desk and began writing again. This time, not about betrayal or revenge, but about forgiveness, freedom, and the strange beauty of endings. When I finished, I hit record on my microphone. My name is Juliet Roberts, I said softly. And this is not a story about heartbreak. It's a story about rebirth. The seasons changed. Winter came, soft and silent, blanketing the town in white. The bakery glowed warmly every morning, a small pocket of comfort in a cold world. I was no longer the woman who glued her husband. People had stopped using that label. Now they just called me Juliet. Sometimes I'd see mothers bringing their daughters, holding their hands, whispering my name like I was someone to admire. It felt strange to be seen not as a victim, but as a survivor. Every loaf I baked carried a piece of my story. Every smile I gave was a quiet reminder that I had lived through something most people only read about. And I was still standing. One day, as I was arranging pastries near the window, I noticed a teenage girl sitting alone outside on the bench, shivering slightly. She looked lost, like she had nowhere to go. Her clothes were thin, her hair tangled. I stepped out with a cup of hot cocoa and said softly, "You look like you could use this." She looked up, startled. "Oh, I didn't mean to. I'm not begging or anything," she stammered. "I didn't say you were," I said gently, handing her the cup. "Drink, it's cold." She hesitated, then took it. "Thank you, ma'am. Where are your parents?" I asked. She looked down. Nowhere. Something inside me shifted. A familiar ache. I sat beside her. "Everyone has a somewhere, sweetheart, even if they don't know it yet." She glanced at me, her eyes filled with something that looked like fear and hope all mixed together. "You really think so?" I smiled. "I know so." Her name was Lily. 16, runaway, surviving off small jobs and sleeping at the bus station. When she told me that, I saw a part of myself in her, the part that had once felt invisible, unwanted, lost. I offered her a job at the bakery. Nothing big, just cleaning tables, stacking bread. She accepted with wide, trembling eyes. Weeks turned into months. Lily became like the daughter I never had. She was clumsy, stubborn, and endlessly curious. But she laughed with a kind of joy that filled every corner of the shop. One afternoon, I caught her watching me while I was kneading dough. "What?" I asked, smiling. She hesitated. "I was just thinking." "You look happy." I paused, hands covered in flour. "Maybe I am," I said. "For the first time in a long time," she grinned. "You should make a YouTube video about that." I laughed, really laughed. "Oh no, sweetheart. The internet's had enough of my stories." But that night, as I sat by the window, her words lingered. I opened my laptop again. The old channel page was still there, echoes of emotion. My last video, "The Day I Let Go," had reached nearly 1 million views. Hundreds of messages still came every week. People from Canada, Australia, the UK, America, all writing to say my story helped them leave toxic marriages, face betrayal, and find themselves again. I pressed record. "Hello again," I began, my voice steady but warm. "It's been a while. If you followed my story, you know the pain, the anger, the betrayal. But today, I want to tell you something different." I looked out the window at the falling snow, the faint glow of the streetlights painting the world in silver. "I learned something," I said softly. "Forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about saying, I deserve peace." I paused, breathing deeply. And sometimes, peace looks like a quiet bakery on a winter morning. Sometimes it looks like a stranger who becomes family. And sometimes, it's just knowing you survived what was meant to break you. I smiled. So wherever you are, whether it's New York, Sydney, Toronto, or a small town you think nobody's heard of, I hope you find your peace too. I ended the recording and uploaded it. No dramatic title, no clickbait, just finding peace. Within days, the video went viral again. Comments flooded in. "I cried, but I needed this." "Your story saved my marriage." "I left an abusive partner because of you." "You made me believe healing is possible." Lily read them out loud, her voice trembling with excitement. "Miss Juliet, you're famous again." I smiled, shaking my head. "No, sweetheart. I'm not famous. I'm free." Months later, I decided to close the bakery for a day. Just one day. I packed a small bag, got in my old car, and drove until the road met the sea. The same ocean Julian had written about in his final letter. The waves were calm, the horizon endless. I sat there for hours, letting the wind tangle my hair, the salt kiss my skin. For the first time, I didn't feel like someone waiting for something. I wasn't waiting for an apology or revenge or closure. I was simply there. The world felt wide again. And in that moment I whispered, "Thank you, Julian, for breaking me, because I wouldn't have rebuilt myself without it." As I stood to leave, I noticed a seashell at my feet, perfectly shaped, glimmering under the fading sun. I picked it up and smiled. When I got home, I placed it on the bakery counter beside the cash register, a small reminder of where pain ends and where peace begins. Every morning since then, it catches the first light of dawn. And every time I see it, I think of all the women who watched my story, who wrote to me, who found strength in my voice. Because this was never just my story. It was ours. And as long as someone out there listens, the echoes of that story, my story, will never fade. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and share it. You never know who might need to hear it today. This is Juliet, and this was my truth.